On behalf of the Regional Group, Deputy Noel Grealish, please.
Your programme for government promises to point out inequalities and implement policies to do better by people. Well, there's a sizable group of people in this country suffering from inequality that follows them even when they have passed away. And today, Tánaiste, I would ask you to tackle an unfairness of a situation that arises when a person who does not have any children of their own dies and leaves their house to a close family member. Currently, the child of someone who dies does not pay tax on the first €335,000 of the value of what they inherit. But a beneficiary who is not a direct descendant, such as a nephew or niece, only enjoys a fraction of that tax-free allowance, even though they may be the closest person to the deceased for decades. In Galway City, the average asking price for a house is more than €335,000, while in Dublin the average is well over €400,000. That's according to a report by daft.ie, based on prices for the first quarter of this year. Take the example of a house whose value is in between these figures at €350,000. It is left to a niece who has been unfailing in looking after the needs of her uncle or aunt for years, maybe running messages, visiting them every day, bringing them to the doctor's appointments and social outings, a true family bond. The first €32,500 is tax-free, which is less than a tenth of what the house is worth, and for the remaining value she has to pay a tax at the rate of 33%, or one-third. That means that the niece must pay capital acquisition tax totalling more than €100,000. There are some very limited exemptions from inheritance tax for a favourite niece or nephew in certain situations, but they are very much in the minority. Tánaiste, our current inheritance rules are effectively punishing people for not having children of their own, and I am sure you will agree that that is just wrong. These are people who have worked all their lives, paid all their taxes, the same as people who became parents. In fact, those who never married would have paid way more tax, having borne the brunt of our taxation system as single people, and are doubly penalised. It is worth noting too that we have gone backwards in relation to tax-free thresholds. Up to 2000 until 2009, the tax-free allowance for a niece or nephew's inheritance was more than €54,000. I have in the past suggested changing the rules in relation to a family home in a pre-budget submissions to the Minister for Finance. Tánaiste, today, Tánaiste, my question to you is a very simple one. Will you commit to changing this grossly unfair taxation regime when forming the next budget?
Thanks very much, Deputy, for raising this important issue. We believe it is appropriate to apply inheritance tax on transfers of wealth between generations. If people are taxed on earned income, it's only fair that people should also be taxed if they inherit income. It's always been recognised, however, that where the beneficiary is a child, including certain foster children, that there should be a generous threshold before inheritance tax kicks in. These are called Group A, and the threshold is currently €335,000. So as a child you can inherit up to €335,000 from a parent without having to pay any inheritance tax at all. It only kicks in on the amount above that. However, the view has always been taken that where the beneficiary is a brother, a sister, a niece, a nephew, or a lineal ancestor, or a lineal descendant of the disponer, that a much lower threshold should apply due to the greater distance in relationship. This explains the current B group which you refer to, where the threshold is €32,500. It should be noted that in certain situations, nieces or nephews may qualify for a favourite niece or favourite nephew release in respect of gifts or inheritances, and in these situations they are treated as though they were a son or daughter. Qualifying nieces or nephews are those who have worked substantially on a full-time basis for a period of 5 years prior to the gift or inheritance being given in carrying on or assisting the carrying on of a trade, business or profession of the disponer. For the nephew or niece to be deemed to be working substantially on a full-time basis in the business, he or she must work more than 24 hours per week at the place where the business, trade or profession is carried out, or more than 15 hours per week where the business, trade or profession is carried out on exclusively by the disponer, any spouse or civil partner of the disponer or the nephew or niece. So that's the current situation whereby a nephew or niece could qualify as though they were a son or daughter. And I think the point you make is correct. I think that probably is too narrow. We should examine ways of broadening that. One thing that occurred to me is, for example, you might be a favourite niece or a favourite nephew who's a carer. who has been looking after somebody in the last couple of years of their life. And that's not counted. If you worked in the business, it is. But if you were caring for somebody, maybe full-time, maybe part-time, in the last couple of years of somebody's life, you don't get treated as a favourite niece or favourite nephew. And I think there may be a number of examples that we could work on together where we could change those rules. I don't think it'd be right to change them wholesale and to treat every niece or nephew as if they were the same as a son or daughter. But where there are particular cases like that, I think we could broaden those criteria, and certainly my office and Minister Downey's office would be happy to take that further with you.
Thank you, Tánaiste, for your response. It's a very different scenario in Northern Ireland and in Britain, where a niece or nephew in the same situation wouldn't have to pay a penny in inheritance tax. Several other countries in Europe and around the world also make it easier for family members to hold on to the family home. Sweden, the Czech Republic and Norway have all scrapped inheritance tax. It's the same in Austria, where a small property transfer tax has to be paid instead. The niece or nephew being left at the 350,000 house would pay little more than 40,000 in Poland, about 20,000 in Italy and even less than that in Bulgaria. Elsewhere around the world, Tánaiste, Australia, New Zealand, Canada and India are just some of the other countries where there is no inheritance tax paid. Tánaiste, will you commit to resolving the inequality that exists in the inheritance tax system in Ireland for people who have no children and wish to leave their home to a close family member?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. We're not going to abolish inheritance tax. As I said earlier, we think it's appropriate that if we taxed earned income, income that people have worked for, it is therefore also appropriate that we tax unearned income, income that people got by means of inheritance or by capital gains or other means. But I do agree that we should increase the thresholds over time. That threshold of 335,000 has been increased in recent years, and it's supposed to be pitched around the cost of an average house. So the average person could pass on the average house to their child without being liable for inheritance tax. And I think as house prices rise, we need to continue to look at that threshold, and it has been increased in recent budgets. And I do think we need to examine this issue of a nephew or a niece being counted as a favourite nephew or favourite niece, particularly if they've been involved in caring duties. So I'm not going to make a commitment to abolish inheritance taxes. I wouldn't agree with that, but I do think we can make changes to make it more fair.